I've had more than enough people to come to me and be like, how can I help you? And I'm like, you actually want to help me for no personal gain other than you just want to see somebody else succeed. And I'll be honest, it took a bit to adjust to. But now I don't know. It's pretty beautiful, to be honest with you, the indie comic scene right here. And
Welcome back to Inspired Inc., the CWS podcast, a show where we promote indie comic creators and become inspired by what they create and their journey of creating it. I'm your host, Brandon Bloxdorf, and today on the show, we have artist Jeff DeMars joining us, and we have a craft talk as we dive into what being an inker truly means, how to stand out as an inker, and how you can support other creators in the smallest of ways. All of this and so much more on today's Inspired Inc. When you're planning your Kickstarter and setting up your stretch goals and setting up your overall goal for the campaign, like what are you taking into consideration to hit that goal? Like what makes you determine that number or like lessen or grow that number?
So for me, I didn't really have a plan. I was just running the numbers and being like, okay, if I can get here, worst case scenario, what would it mean? What would the cost be? What would I be breaking even? Would I be ending up with stuff to get me to conventions? And really, ultimately, my goal with the Kickstarter was to get it to people outside of Minnesota, where I'm from, and B, end with enough content to put on a table at the local cons. Like that was really my goal. I have nobody to pay. There's no debts. The penciler on it and we wanted to make it, and we've done that. So now we want to get it in people's hands. So ultimately that was the goal of the Kickstarter, to get at the end, be able to pump all that money into the production of things that we can further get out to other people. And as far as that goes, the $300 is a success in that mind. And nice. The further this goes and the more stretch goals we have, the more different things that we'll get to offer other people at conventions on the table as well. So the stretch goals for me are kind of a fun way to build the offerings that we'll have moving forward.
I love that. I love how it's like all about like, well, I'm just trying to get my book out there. I'm trying to get it out of my state, out of my city. Yeah. And I think that's such a good way to go about it because, it's also something I've never really thought about or considered when I'm doing a Kickstarter is that like, yeah, my local area is going to have it. Maybe some surrounding cities may have it, but to get it like across the country into someone's hands, to get it into like across, the ocean into someone's hands is even radder, or even just like into Canada or something. But like that being one of your primary objectives is just like, I just want it out there across as far as it could go and see where it can land. And that's like appealing enough. Dude, that's like passion. You're not doing it for the money. You're doing it just to like have this book come to life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, and tell you a story. The last one I did, we finished. Me and the penciler did as well. We've been working. This is like our third one now. Our second one that we did, we got it done in like 2008. So back then, this was like not any of these options weren't a thing. We literally took a road trip. Like we got in a car and drove down the Mississippi as far as we could in a week, and just stopped at comic book shops along the way and like begged them to put it in. Like, we don't even want money. Like, here you go. We put it on your shelf. And that was how we could get it out. That and conventions back then were a lot more sparse than they are now. And Wizard World was the thing, and people don't even remember it anymore. But we paid to go to Chicago, and that was all just cost. All of it was cost to get 20 people to buy your book. So this crowdfunding is absolutely a great way. Comic Wellspring also has the ability to sell it in a store, which is another thing that just can expand you to other people. And I'm shocked that people bought the digital version of the Kickstarter, and they're in different countries. And to me, I don't know how they heard of it. They must have just stumbled upon it and saw it and bought it. And that is probably, that $4 for that one digital is probably one of the more humbling things that has happened to me in a long time. So I didn't see that coming for some reason, that somebody that I know I've never talked to saw it and thought, yeah, I'm going to buy that. And they're halfway across the world. To me, that's pretty nuts.
Yeah, Dude, it's yeah, someone's finds such appeal in your art that they're just like, "Oh, this is worth it." And it's, overseas shipping is so much, and it's also such a pain when you're doing fulfillment and being like, "Man, I gotta do some overseas stuff now," and, like, prep those packages and fill out
Yeah.
those forms for international, like, stuff. But, like, I love that because someone reading your book and ordering it off your Kickstarter for just a digital, doesn't matter if they're overseas or within the country, like, that almost benefits you as a creator more in a
Mhm.
sense because like there's no cost that's going into it for you. That's just purely money that's going to help you as a creator. And I think that a lot of people do forget about that. Like that digital reward is, it's there for a reason because it's an
Mhm.
immediate way to support and still get something out of it. The physicality of like having to print, having to put that money towards printing, towards shipping, and then the labor of fulfillment afterwards, that's a whole process. But like a digital reward is like you made my job so much easier. Thank you. Like now I could
Yeah.
just like, I gain this couple bucks and it's an easy link drop and you get rewarded. You help me in just the smallest way you possibly could. And that is more than enough most of the time as well. I love digital rewards. I think it's really appealing, and there's a lot of people who can't back, our
Mhm.
our Kickstarters or buy a full book, whether it's a $4 book or if it's a $15 book. Like a digital version, dude, I'd much rather someone do that than like, be like, man, I don't know if I could eat lunch tomorrow
Yeah.
because I helped this Kickstarter or something.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many good books out there. Like, I totally agree. I was kind of like, I'm gonna buy the book. I'm gonna buy the book always when I back stuff, and I was like, man, it's getting out of hand here. There's so many things, and now, yeah, I push more to digital rewards, and some of the reasons you just said, it's like it is a lot easier for me to drop a link because I'm gonna drop that link for anybody who buys it. I mean, I don't have a tier essentially that someone's not getting that. So if that's all they're
Mhm.
getting, then that's the easiest thing to offer. And I don't know. And I'm also, I'm sure some people are a little bit more protective of the digital. Like, I kind of hope people like put it in an email and like send it to their friends and be like, just
Oh, right.
read
Yeah.
it and check them out. And, but again, I'm not trying to earn a living here or pay back anything I'm owed. So I can be a little bit more loose with that encouragement. But I think that's one of the cool benefits. It's almost just like borrowing somebody a CD. It's like, check it out. And as long as you're still putting out new content, I think it'll always come back to pay itself in the end.
Yeah, and you're very active on social media too. So I think your participation with a lot of things,
I'm
and
trying.
what you're posting. Yeah, dude, it's a pain. I think that's the biggest thing we all struggle with is like social media. And we talk about it a lot on the show that like it is the hardest thing to conquer, the hardest thing to keep up with. And it really does like not only you open your app and you're distracted instantly,
Yeah.
but like mentally it just like wears you down trying to like curate your posts and make your captions and should I toss some hashtags in here maybe because nobody really gets if it helps or not. All of us are like it helps and then afterwards we're just like
Yeah.
it didn't help me at all. So like it's a tug of war, win and lose guessing game, I feel, with social media, especially for us who are our own businesses trying to
Mhm.
promote our work and get these things out in their world. Like we depend on our community to help our social media pages have that uplift. If I didn't have people sharing and like supporting posts and tagging and collaborative posts and things like that, I don't think I'd have nearly the reach I ever got with Apollo.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's another thing because a lot of everything I have right now is like from this lens of like, what was it like the last time I got one actually finished and now? And the landscape of community is way different in indie
Hmm.
comics than it was about a decade ago. And I don't know where the shift came because I obviously was like gone, and it might just be that social media is that change that really pushed it. But around 10 years ago, it almost felt like it was everybody against everybody. Everybody was like in competition to get that sale or figure out how to make a comic book or protective of their printer or whatever. And now it just seems like everybody's just an open book. And more importantly, not only that, they're an active participant in being an open book. I've had more than enough people to come to me and be like, how can I help you? And I'm like, you actually want to help me for no personal gain other than you just want to see somebody else succeed. And I'll be honest, it took a bit to adjust to. But now I don't know. It's pretty beautiful, to be honest with you. The indie comic scene right here, and like the lesser known comic guys that you're a part of. Like I'm not a part of that, but for some reason they dropped my name, and then someone else there goes, "Oh yeah, that's great. Like I want to talk to them." And then when I went live yesterday with the Kickstarter, people I've known for just like a hot minute are hopping on, and that's linking them to me, and I just sit there kind of like I don't even know what to say, because to me it's, I'm realizing now it's not a big ask, it's not a big movement for them, and but when you're new to it's really super meaningful, and it makes me want to pass it on, whether or not like my presence helps. I'm going to keep doing it, just to really kind of pay it all forward, and it's a fun thing for the community to have shifted to that.
I think that's it's probably what happened at some point in the community. Somebody like got that wild hair and was like, you know what? I'm just gonna like support my friend right here and
Yeah.
give them like a shout out. And then they're like, oh man, that was really cool of you. You know what? I'll do that for you. And then they did it for someone else. And then it just like snowballed and
Mhm.
all of the mind shift has changed. Cause you're right. Like, I mean, we talk about a lot, but like I grew up with music, and in music, it just felt very competitive. It felt like we're
Yeah.
all against each other. Nobody wants to share secrets. Nobody wants to say what pedals they're using or how they're doing techniques and what, you know what I mean? Like it was very
Yeah.
like top secret. Like if I tell you I'll never make it big and it's going to ruin
Mhm.
my chances of success. And comics felt like that at first. And it
Yep.
seemed to be like, how do I even get an artist to draw a book as a writer? And once you kind of like get involved with everyone, everyone's like, you want to just work on a book? It sucks. It's hard. But you know what?
Yeah.
Let's do it together and then we'll work things out afterwards. And now that landscape is changing. I think people are realizing that there's a way to make comics, and it's, probably not profitable, but we have support and it can it can happen. It just takes time, and the
Yeah.
money will come. It's just real slow, and it's just very in small increments. But if you look at the numbers over like a 3-year period, you'd probably be blown away about like what you're making over your books, and
Mhm.
it's out of passion and fun and a side gig and whatnot. But like that whole aspect of competition is just diminishing more and more, and it's becoming about support. That indie creator con that's being announced in Connecticut later in March and whatnot. That's what that's all about too. Is
Yeah.
that whole supporting the network, supporting the community. Let's get people out there and focus on the comics and the books and the creators, and let's uplift them and connect together. And that way we can all have success, because we all just want to keep doing this, and it's real hard, to be honest.
Hmm.
Uh, I
Yeah,
don't.
I don't have say a ton of skills I say like I'm peak at, but inking is the thing I probably focused on the most over the like last decade, and it was like pulling teeth to figure out how to even like hold a crow quill, like even how do you even throw a line. Like there was no videos, that there was some books, but that just has words on page. It's not like a physical video, and it's one of the things now when I do lives, I'm like I just got to start with like some random thing that to me took me a long time to figure out how to do, but is such a nothing burger. And I don't know why there wasn't more videos out there of this is how I hold a pen and this is how I throw these hatch marks. Like that's it. Some of those simple things. And then hopefully someday someone comes by and like, well, how do they do that line? And it's right there for them to get and kind of give back that way. But yeah, the secrecy is really, really gone away. And you see so many, especially with live streams, so many artists are just like, on the spot, how did you do what you just did? And they just show it.
Mhm.
And that's really, really cool.
And so, like, what got you into inking specifically? I've always been very much drawn, especially as I've started my own little like creative drawing journey. Like, inking
Yeah.
is really where I find a lot of fun. What got you to like land there? And I don't know if you've seen the movie Chasing Amy by Kevin Smith, but there's
Don't
that
bring it up.
whole
Don't bring it up.
I know, yeah, that whole scene where it's just like the tracer type of aspect. And as a kid, I found it humorous. And as like an adult, when I was watching it, I was like, that's so hilarious, because it's
Yeah.
like, the thing is that it's not true. And it's a very big argument. And it's, you're perceived as a certain way from like an outsider standpoint, but everyone knows the importance of a solid, amazing inker.
Hmm.
So like what got you into that, and what got you to like transform yourself into, your own technique and style with inking?
Yeah, I picked up inking in college, which I might as well just age myself, was back in like 2003, so a long time ago. And I picked it up because I've been working with the same penciler that's on the Mariner since then. We met in college, and we're like, we should make comic books. And the first one we did was a book that used Maverick and Bullseye from Marvel. We made like just a fun comic of something we wanted to see, and I was like, well, you can draw it, I'll write it, and I'll do everything else. I'll figure out how to letter it. I'll ink it. And that was like my way to just see it through to the end. To put less on him, because it always felt like the pencils was the heavy lift. That probably shows how like little I was putting on writing back then, which I adjusted my thought process on. But I was like, all right, I'll just write something silly, and then we'll draw it. And then from there, like, I really did want to get into comics for a long time in my 20s. And that felt like the avenue as somebody who didn't consider themselves good enough to draw, which is a whole nother topic that I will fight myself against as well. That it's not about being good enough or talent. It's just about committing yourself. So for a long time, I was
really just getting the work done. That's the hardest part. And it skill levels, it doesn't matter. You're absolutely right. It's about can you finish what you set out to do? And that's the real challenge. That's the real push and test to be like an artist of some sort.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say, like, with inking and with all of it, I probably made every mistake in the book along the way. I was like, oh, I don't need to be an artist. I don't have to learn art technique. I can ink. Like, I see it there. I just got to learn how to use the tools. That's all I need. And that was a big lie. I told myself that I didn't make strides until I started looking at inking as an art form, as more than just a advanced tracer. And yeah, and I think at that point, you're a hop, skip, and a jump from penciling your own stuff and feeling really confident from your own things. And honestly, though, like, I don't being self-taught, which I believe is kind of everybody's self-taught. Like, everybody puts in the work, whether they go to school for it or whether they stare at images until it makes sense to them, or they watch YouTube videos. We're all self-taught. And to me, I think inking was my way of getting to be what I consider an artist myself. And I would just stare at, like, when I look at comic books, it's still that way. I only look at the inking for some reason. Like, I don't really see, and as I'm expanding and I'm trying to learn color and stuff, it's expanding. But for a good decade, when I read something, like, I almost like wouldn't get into it if I didn't like the inking. And I, that's a terrible way to do it.
No, I love that, though, because it's like you're focused on that. You're hyper focused on it. You know what I mean? And you're trying to pull from whatever you're looking at. It's your diet. Your diet's very essential. If you're trying to, like, get stronger, you take protein, and you're focused on protein. So that was your protein at the time,
Yep. And then, but I would say that it became less and less of a possibility to be an inker as like a career for me as I grew older. And it just became a way that I could contribute to making comics for myself and for my friends. And I definitely, like, the last 5 years pushed more on learning the rest of the skills, like being an actual penciler, learning how to do things more efficiently than perfect, which was where I was kind of sticking with inking. Is like, I'm just going to be perfect at inking. And now it's like, I need to be fast, and I need to be accepting of it not being perfect, so I can move on and do the other things I want to do as an artist too. So
what do you think defines, like, good inking in your opinion?
I'm not going to say good inking, because I have a style that I prefer, and maybe that's probably a better way to do it. I'm a very clean inker, so I get frustrated with stuff that's not clean. But that said, that is also amazing. So, like, I learned a lot. Klaus Janson, who probably best known for inking Frank Miller a lot. I don't really like that way of inking, but I read his inking book, like, front to back many times. That man taught me a lot about inking, but it's not the way I prefer to do it, and it's not the way that I think looks amazing. But one of the, I guess, for me, that's kind of where I go. I like things with really clean edges. I'm big on line weight variation to show light and form, and because to me, that was the hardest thing I had to learn. So it's more of, I think certain ways look best because I just see an appreciation in it that I, to be honest, I don't see in the other ones, because I haven't banged my head against a wall to figure out how to ink really, really dirty and have it be beautiful. So I don't understand what went into it, which is, kind of same thing with anything. Is you do something once, you're like, that was so hard. So you watch someone else do it and you're like, that's amazing. I want to get there. And I'm trying to be more loose with things. And I've been going back to people that I generally shy away from, because I want to expand what I'm good at. And I want to be able to look at that and understand how they got there, and really, really appreciate them on a way that I do with very clean inkers. So
That's so interesting. And I love that, because like there's already a contrast in like our preference in inking. Cause I do like that messy inking. I love that Bill Sienkiewicz type of splatter, kind of
mm-hmm.
messy, drawn everywhere, lines, a lot of line work. And that's what I aspire to be. The aspect of clean inking is just like, I feel like that just seems so much harder. Maybe that's why I think dirty inking is maybe more appealing to me, because it's like I can make a mistake and you won't even notice, type of thing.
Yeah.
But I love that, because like I don't think people realize that when you ink a page, and you use a lot of traditional work and everything, like that line is that line.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to have like your breathing under control. You have to have your hand like in the right, like your mental space has to be there, because if you're shaking and if you're like anxious at the time, you got to figure out a way to calm yourself down to like channel through into the page. So it takes a lot of focus and a lot of attention, and
Mm-hmm.
also you're playing with like color density in a sense. You're playing with the black and whites. How did you figure out, what is too much and what is too little? Because I feel when I started trying to ink, I would do, thin lines, go over my pencils, and I'm like, it looks so bare,
Mm-hmm.
and it's taken me a while to really like embrace like the darkness and like fill the blacks and like make thicker lines and everything. What really gets you to understand that balance between the blacks and the whites on the page?
I mean, obviously that's where reading kind of helps. To me, lighting didn't make a lot of sense until I read people explain it to me. Like this type of hatch mark coming out of a solid black won't look right unless you do it with sometimes a very aggressive thin to thick. Because if you see, like for me, if I see a black area with hatch marks coming out of it to show gradation from hard blacks to white, but I see the edge of the black, I'm lost. Like you lose me. The gradation is gone. You're essentially, you're now describing two differently equally shaded areas instead of one going from dark to light. And so reading things like that, you're like, okay, now I know what I need to do. I need to figure out how to make lines that don't leave a solid black edge if I want to show a gradation from hard black and up. And so that's just like one example of looking at it. In terms of like how much black to do, working with a penciler, I usually don't do my own thoughts on lighting. I'll say, hey, like I noticed this, like, do you think we need more black here or not? I don't make a lot of those calls. Though I am probably at a point with my buddy Nolan, who's the penciler on Tales of the Mariner issue here. I kind of do whatever I want with his stuff at this point, but we've been working on stuff forever that if he got mad at me, I'd just be like, all right, fine, I'll print it out again and I'll do it the whatever way you want. But for the most part, he just goes, oh, great, because he's like, I don't ink. So, whatever you want to do, go for it. So I think it's a partnership, a true inking penciler partnership. That lighting, for the most part, unless that's your agreement, is you do lighting as an inker. It'll always be set. So it's more of finding examples of that type of transition that you like and trying to be consistent, which is probably a bigger issue through an entire comic book than doing it right, is doing it one way and repeating that way in every image throughout the comic so it looks united. Yeah.
Oh, dude, that's a great point too. Your consistency throughout the issues and continuing issues in that series have to kind of hold up, because that palette you set, from the beginning, that tone you set up, it should be maintained. And I think people forget about that. Like inking really does set the tone of the book. The blacks on a book really do let you know like where this book is going to be leaning towards, and like the weight of the lines are going to let you know like the dramatic, moments of the situations and whatnot. Because just thinner lines, more like painted feels and everything, very small inks, probably
Yeah.
brighter moments, flashbacks, things like that. Heavier inks could be a lot more mystery, darkness, like just
Mhm.
crazy scenes. So like looking at those line weights and looking at that tone you're setting personally, you're kind of the first foundation of all that,
Mhm.
because the penciler lays out our blueprint, and then we start building the house at that point, and you're the base, you're the foundation, you're the walls, and like everything going up before they put the colors and the words and everything, all the flashiness on. You are like what constructs the book. um I feel like that's such a big responsibility as a creator, and I don't feel like inkers like really get enough credit, just like letterers a lot of time don't get enough credit. They're like somebody that's kind of missed out. Everyone looks at pencils because that's the first foundation, that's like what's
Mhm.
sculpted, but you are what brings it to life. You're
Mhm.
what makes it pop off the page. What are some of your favorite, like besides Klaus, like some other people you kind of lean towards for inspiration?
Um, I I would say I'm gonna just list one because he's been so big, and honestly, probably the reason I ink period is Richard Friend. He's an old Wildstorm guy. Yeah, he's getting into doing his own art too. But he inked Wildcats 3.0 back in the day, and I don't know what it is about that art, but like if you want an example of what I consider like the pinnacle of art, or like the thing I just went, whoa, okay, that is neat. Like obviously the penciler on that Shrest is awesome, but what Richard did to those pencils to me was like that. There you go. That is an artist laid on top of another artist, and it's undeniable because I saw the pencils. I know what the pencils look like, and what he did to them was it was a partnership. It wasn't tracing like everybody would talk about or mock you for doing. It was legitimate art placed on top of legitimate art and made something completely new. And to me, I think he's a great example. He's also one of those people that isn't precious about knowledge. He's got a YouTube channel, and he's got videos that show you what tools are, how to use them, and you go, okay, I see this person, and granted, he's got a bunch of years of experience, but he makes it very clear you put in the time, you put in the thought, you put in the effort, and this thing I'm doing can be a thing that you can someday do as well. So for me, I can't give enough praise for him and what he did. And I've tried to tell him a couple times. I don't know if he remembers, but it's he's definitely a huge inspiration.
You definitely got to drop that YouTube link to me after this too. I'd love to check that
Yeah.
out. I mean, that's one of my favorite parts is like just uncovering ways to get better. Like, do you have any like ideas or tips that could help inkers, throughout their journey that you've kind of encountered? Like, what has really made you like? What are some key things you've realized about inking that have really transformed your work, or really like took a while to click, and you're like, oh, I finally understand the purpose behind this.
Yeah, I think one is finding videos. Like that was once I found some videos and I didn't feel like I was, because if you're just like, okay, I know they use this tool, so I'm just gonna mess around with this tool and try to create whatever I know they're creating with it. But even if you're doing it, you feel like, am I doing it right? Is there an easier way? And so getting some references. So again, like Richard Friend's a great, he's got a YouTube channel, and I'll send it to you, is great. But to me, mastering line weight variation is probably it was the most rewarding part or skill I learned is, all right, lights coming from the top, just make the bottom line of an arm a little bit darker, a little bit thicker, will show that. And not knowing that really what was going on. And just, it's not about putting that line in ink. It's about thinking about the top of a shape versus the bottom of the shape, and just giving it a little bit of difference. Even if like it's a heavily colored image, like I just need the outline because I'm going to color it, and that's going to be what dictates a lot of the shading. Making that bottom line of, say, an arm that's raised with a light coming down from the top, making the bottom just a little bit thicker is going to add so much. And if you do a little bit of like variation for like the muscle on the bottom of the arm, so if the tricep's kicking out, you make a little thinner line on that kick out versus the kind of flatter side of the tricep, that's going to add a lot of character. And so just those contour lines and how to work with line weight variation on the contour of shape, to me that was probably, it felt like the biggest step for me. The rest of it was just skills, like learning how to do hatching and things like that. But that was like the first one I really felt like, okay, this is contributing, because a lot of that's not done by a penciler. A lot of, some will really be super clean. But those type of artists, honestly, you can just darken their pencils and move on. Like, you don't really need to do anything. But a lot of them, they're drawn with a pencil, like a 0.07 millimeter lead, and they're not bothering to figure out how thick some of those contour lines should be. And that's where you get to have your input. Mm-hmm. And I think that was probably the biggest thing. And a lot of any inking books out there, they really do they talk about that. So
actually, well, speaking of inking books, I actually just got this last week. Framing the Ink. I don't know if you've ever checked this one. Framed Ink.
I just got them from the library. They're upstairs. Yeah, I read. He's got like 5 books, and I didn't know about him either. I saw him randomly, and I just went through them, and those things are awesome. Those things are cool. I was like, I wish I had this like 10 years ago. It's all right here. Yeah, no, framed ink. That's, yeah, I absolutely recommend those.
Oh, awesome.
Have you looked at it much?
I just I opened it like 2 days ago, and it was in my pile as I was cleaning up my desk, and I was like, okay, cool. This is gonna be my next, kind of like, I take books on like editing and like storytelling. Yeah. And so, I've done the how to draw the Marvel method way and all that type of stuff. So that's like my next step in like the artistic journey that I'm kind of going on with that. I'm really excited for it because that's something I kind of want to get down a bit better, is exactly what you were saying, is figuring out like how to make that line work, like mm-hmm. Where you need to put those heavy lines, where the lighter lines should be. And already I could picture in my head, like if I'm looking at an image, and just to be like, okay, I should have lighter lines up here just to practice, and then see what happens when I put them darker and see how it changes the composition of my piece. I have these little drawings I'm turning into zines at this point, and I'm re-inking them on my iPad because they're just scanned, I'm scanning the pencils in, and I'm using that right now because I do like doing traditional inking too. Mm-hmm. I use a couple tools. I don't know if I could get this to focus. Yeah, I love using brushes. Brushes are some of my favorite. Pentel, yeah. And then I have this
whole thing over here. Yeah, I have to have all of those.
Oh wait, where'd it go? This one actually, it's another Pentel pen. I wish my camera would focus on it. But these brush pens, I love using brushes. Like, do you have particular tools that you have a preference towards?
Yeah, I actually did a video on my Instagram the other day. One of the lives I posted, I started off going through all the brush pens. I hit on that Pentel you just showed. But primarily now, I use Tombow brush pens, which are felt. They're felt tip, meant to mimic brush. And I don't know, I actually put everything away for one. So,
but yeah, moment, right? Yeah. I usually have supplies everywhere too.
Yeah. They're how do you do? No. Oh yeah, here's an example. So this is an example of one of the Tombows, and this one's kind of neat because it actually has a gray marker on the other side, so you can do some gray shading with like your doodles. That's the one I bring with my sketchbook. But those Tombows are cheap. They last forever. You can buy them in 2 packs. That's 2 different tips. One's kind of a more firm, so the line weight variation you can do with it is less. And the other one is you can get a lot of range with it. And I ended up going with that one because it was the closest thing to a brush that was a little bit more forgiving than a brush. You can't quite do everything for sure that you can with a brush, but the brush is a beast. When you ink the way I ink, I want it to be clean, but I also like going fast, and I've never been able to figure out how to do that fast and not screw up with a brush. I would do some squiggly thing in a line, and then I'd freak out and have to start over. So for me, definitely the the Tombow probably brush pens are my go-to with everything. And I'm at a point now where I pretty much, the last like 5 pages I did with the Mariner book, I didn't use anything else unless it was, I had to do white for something, or just fill in a black area. And then I just, use a regular brush for that. But in terms of the actual inking of the page before, I really can get through anything with just that one tool now, which is kind of nice.
Oh, cool. That was actually going to be my next question is like, do you stick to one bush or one, pin throughout a process, or do you like using 3 or 4 or 5 different types of styles and pins and whatnot? Like, do you feel like it's easier kind of on your brain to kind of just work with one tool at that point?
Yeah, I think, well, it goes back to being consistent, and I would love to use different tools, but I wanted this book to keep looking the same. So it was kind of one of the frustrating things. I've been working on it so long, and I've been really advancing like my skills as an inker, but I wasn't using them on this book, so I didn't really feel like I could throw them in like page 7 all of a sudden, like he's doing this other thing. So I really was like holding myself back a lot, which is great, because it was consistent. It also taught me how to do more with less, and tools wise. So yeah, when I first started inking this, I was all over the place. I was using different tools. I was keeping the inking style consistent, but trying different things and getting kind of a feel for it. And by the end, it is nice that, yeah, I have to sit down and ink. I grab one tool and I'm there with that thing until the page is done. And I want to fill in the blacks with just, a brush pen. And it's very helpful because, like you said, like you get in a mind space and you get warmed up, and it is kind of frustrating to stop and be like, all right, where's that other thing I want to use real quick for like 3 seconds, then go back to this other thing. And so yeah, it is very helpful. And I think it's a cool testament to like learning craft when you can bend certain tools to your will and say like, all right, I can do more and more with this one thing that I think I told myself is only good in certain scenarios. So
Oh yeah, dude. I completely agree there because especially with brushes, like when I was trying to figure out how to make like a thin line out of a brush and make it go into a thicker line, that was difficult. You know what I mean? The steadiness, like learning how to like raise your brush to the right point and also have the right amount of pressure, but also have your hand have that consistency with that pressure as you're doing, if you're rotating or even just doing a straight line, it's really challenging. And it's really easy to screw up or just like go from a thin line to like a blob out of
yeah.
nowhere. And you're just like, how do I even like correct this? Do you feel like, masking your mistakes and working with your mistakes is like one of the key components as an inker to like grow and just expand? Cause I feel like, once it's on there, you have to work with it at some point.
Yeah. I mean, I've redone a lot of pages. So I'm one of those people, if I screw up and I can't make it look the way I want to look it, digital is nice because you can scan it and try to salvage it later too. But I like having a physical page that's right when I'm done. So I do try to roll it as best I can, but I've dropped just like big globs of ink, and you're like, okay, well, I guess I'm doing this thing over. And it's needless stress, to be honest with you, because there's tools that you can get around it. But I am the person I am now, so I tend to just be like, I want things very clean, and if I screw things up, sure, there's sometimes, yeah, I can do that, but if you can't, you can't. And for me, I'll put in the time to redo things. But that said, I don't think that's probably healthy. I think you definitely got to learn to roll with the punches a bit more than that. And with regards to brushes, a couple of like huge tips that I've heard people say is don't do your big lines until you're warmed up. I used to just think I could hop on and do anything, and that's where I redid a lot of things. And now I'm like, I just noodle around on stuff, and then I'll get to that big line I got to get to.
Oh, cool.
Practice air throwing the line so you can just get the movement down. So a big one, I'll I'll do the motion like 3 or 4 times before I just move that tip down. And sometimes I'm moving that tip down thinking I'm going to hit the paper and I'm not, and I eventually do. And it works if you get used to it. And the last tip I get with big long lines is once you start the line, you look where you're going, not where, or you look where you're ending, not where you're going. And
Oh, cool.
your body will follow. Like, you know, the line, because you've looked at the line. You need to focus on where you're ending, and your body will get you there. And crazy things about vision and your brain and all that is it's filling in those blanks because it knows it. And I thought that was a lie for the longest time, but it's so true that you're like, okay, I've started the line, it's going. I look to where I'm going, and you end up there. And a lot of that muscle memory of like, all right, how you pull that tool back up to start lessening the line, or bringing it down to increasing it, or they just get into play, and all that practice and repetition really pays off.
Oh, I love that. That's so true too. I was, thinking about some of my own experiences. I feel like I fumble more when I'm looking at the path and I'm so focused on like, I need to follow this path perfectly. And that's where my lines will get bigger or smaller, or I'll have like a squiggly moment. You know what I mean? But if you
Mm-hmm.
just let it flow, just
Yeah.
trust yourself, it'll happen and it'll work out. Um,
Mm-hmm.
do you like really just focus purely on traditional? Do you do anything digital in your process?
So as you know, I'm my next book. I'm going to do everything start to finish, and so penciling is newer to me. It's the thing I'm taking on, and challenging myself, and that I'm going to be doing digital. Like,
Oh, cool.
I mean, I
Interesting.
have a sketchbook that I draw in and I practice in, but having an undo button with my pencils seems like something I want right now. And the ability to use some of the tools that are in like Clip Studio for building out a panel, such as the perspective tools and things like that.
Hmm.
I mean, the people who can do that on paper, build perspective out on paper, and have a big enough desk that they can put their perspective lines on. I mean, that's amazing. I don't, and I think if I'm taking on enough, like learning how to draw in general, you probably feel the same way that like I finally realized that things that I considered like hacks or like not real are not the way that I knew people to do it, aren't really that way. It's just I'm
Mm.
choosing to
Yeah.
learn it different. I know where I'll end up. I someday would love to end up penciling on paper, but I'm not there right now. And I'm not going to sit here and try to figure out how to get there and spend 10 years learning how to get there and not actually do anything. I need to just keep practicing on the side that way and work with the tools I have to help me get those pencils done digitally. And from there, yeah, I'll print them out. I'll always do traditional inks because I've invested too much time and the ability for these things to do certain things, tools that I can't walk away from it anymore. And the old school in me loves the tactile thing that
Oh,
like I
yeah.
have one of a kind, yeah, piece. And so I'll probably keep doing that. And then I do lettering digitally, but Brian DePillis does his on paper, and I think it's so cool. It makes me mad that I'm gonna probably do it on paper now too. I'll probably do manual lettering as well, but traditionally I do that digitally as well as like any like zipatones, and that's more so because
Mm.
zipatones are expensive than
Yeah.
the fact that I want to do it digitally. I'd rather do it. I'd rather do like zipatones on paper, but man, they're so expensive and so much.
It's a process too. Yeah.
Yeah.
The zine I'm kind of putting together of my old drawings, I'm using Zipatones, but I'm using it through Procreate. And I was like thinking
Mhm.
about it one day as I was, on my lunch break. And I was like, man, this would take me days if I was doing this by
Yeah.
hand and whatnot. Like just the process behind it. And I mean, I guess that is the benefit behind digital work is just the speed you could do it by. Which I find really interesting that you're going to be doing pencils on there. Cause I always, in my brain, especially as a beginning artist, like I was like, oh, I should ink on an iPad because then I can make the mistakes a lot easier. And I feel like
Yeah.
inking covers up my penciling mistakes so much that if my pencils are bad or if there's room for improvement on them, I'm just gonna like fix it either by hand on inks or like, via digital. Do you feel like as an inker, you're also like you're also correcting pencils at the same time or like little minor mistakes within stuff?
Yeah, I would say with my partnership with Nolan on the pencils, I mean, again, like I've known him so long that I'm kind of almost, and I say this to him, I apologize, but like I'm sometimes very disrespectful to your pencils. Like he'll send me a panel, and I've done this several times where I just don't ink the background. I'm like, I'm not putting that background in there. Like, I don't think it works. I don't want to do it. And then later I look at it and I looked at my finished inks with his blue line pencils in the background. He's got like three guys he bothered to draw in some buildings. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. So I wouldn't say I'm fixing things, is more so
It's more of an
kind of
editorial
making,
thing
yeah,
at that
making
point, you know?
my own kind of comments on the art too. And I can't say they're wrong, but definitely it is, I would say, a role of an inker, and you could probably hear any pros, I've heard several say it, to actually address issues with art. So if they get pencils where they're like the lighting is off, they really should adjust it. They shouldn't just say, well, he drew it that way, so I'm going to do it. And if it's glaringly wrong, they should address it. If they don't put in a shadow where clearly something would add a shadow, you should be addressing that. If the autonomy, like a great example, I have it on my Kickstarter. It's page 1. There's a guy drinking a bottle. And I remember when I was inking that panel, he drew a twist off top, and he's probably gonna be so mad at me that I brought it up. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure in the 1800s they didn't have twist off bottle tops on their whiskey. And then I did a bunch of research just to make sure. I didn't, like, how long have we had twist off bottle caps on whiskey bottles? I don't know, but I don't think it was around back then. So then I changed that bottle top to be smooth and not have a twist off. So, I mean, yeah, it is your job, especially if you feel like you're being respected in the process, to
Yeah.
be an equal contributor to the art. And in our case, we're doing a black and white book. I actually, for a long time, wasn't going to do any sort of shading with Zipatone at all. It was just going to be the lines stood by themselves. So that's how we approached it. Is this needs to be good enough without any other help to look this way? And then, kind of when I was getting it together, I was like, I did a couple of pages with Zipatone, and they add so much. You know, it's just another, instead of feeling like it was not, we weren't doing our goal. It was just saying like, we're just adding on to it. We're adding another layer that takes it to another level. So I think to your original question, yeah, an inker should consider themselves an equal part in the process. And if they see something that's wrong, address it. Depending on your relationship, you may want to ask first, unlike me, who just does whatever he wants and then ask for forgiveness later. But yeah, you should absolutely like feel like what you're contributing is important and can actually address shortcomings up to that point.
That makes so much sense too, because when you think about the process of making a book and how a book goes through drafts, it's not just the writer who makes 3 drafts of the script. The book itself goes through drafts. You go from, you have the bare bones script, probably from a writer, and then you move
Mhm.
on to pencils, which is like draft 2, which has brought those words into life. Draft 3 is kind of the inks, which you are now going over those pencils and adding or taking away. You're maneuvering what's needed for the storytelling purposes, which then we move into phase 3, which is like the coloring and lettering around that point as well. And lettering, you even edit the script again, typically,
Yeah.
to make sure it fits with everything. So it's all part of the process. And it's not even more of like, oh, I did this to fix the mistakes the penciler made. It's like, no, this is draft 2. This is my portion of it. When you're building a song, you have the drums, the guitar, the bass, the vocals, all of them are individual parts that you fit together to make this amazing thing. And you don't have, like a really good bassist is really good at
Mhm.
counterpoint. And so you're not wanting to play the exact thing the guitarist is playing, like you want to counterpoint their stuff and add flavor and add style and add your own essence to it. Or else the penciler could have just done it. You know what I mean? It's one of those things. Like you could just had someone else do it. Why
Mhm.
have a full team if you're not going to give them that ability to have a standout moment? If you're not going to give them their spotlight to shine and bring their own style into it, just do it yourself at that point. You know what I mean? And not like in a disrespectful way of do it
Yeah.
yourself. It's like if you're not wanting to collaborate and if you're not understanding of that process, then there's other avenues to go around it. But I love seeing a full team on a book.
Hmm.
And I love seeing more people on books because it adds so much to it. And you could pull different distinct things from it, you know? I love hearing a
Hmm.
bass solo. I love hearing guitar solo, but they're two totally different things,
Yeah.
you know? And I love having them come together and build a song. That's the cool part. And that's what you're doing with this penciler and everything too.
Hmm.
And inkers are just not noticed on what they do on craft. And I think
Yeah.
it's like pinnacle because you could have a comic that's black and white, but you really can't have a comic that's just pencils either. Like you need
Yeah.
that inking perspective onto it to make it fulfilling.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the draft thing is a great way to put it. I've never really thought of it that way because there was definitely a page here when I got to inking and got done with inking and lettering, and I was like, man, there's a lot of words on this panel, and I loved this panel he drew, and it was like a pulled back shot of a cemetery, and the way we had gotten it down is like, I don't want to cover this up with words. Like I had a real hard time with it, so I rewrote like 2 or 3 pages of script to have it end different, to have the panel have more weight and hit harder. And I sent it back to him. I was like, yeah, I had to change it because I just like love this panel so much. And his response was, he's like, I drew it that way because you had a ton of words on that panel and I wanted to make room for it. And I was like, well, it's your fault. You made a beautiful thing that I think looks great. And it changed the script because of it. And I think that page hits so much harder. It's easily our favorite page in the book, too, because every panel he just kind of nailed on that. And yeah, that stuff happened way more than you think. And I think I'm a big fan of not giving a lot of direction
Mhm.
in script writing for that. If like you trust your penciler, you're going to get something weird that you didn't expect out of their interpretation of the
Oh
story.
yeah.
The story will always be the story. So you don't have to worry about them taking the story from you, which I think is why people overwrite a script. Um, and
True.
it'll grow. It'll be that draft. It'll be that draft one pencils, and then inking will be a thing on top of it. And then lastly, that lettering is absolutely like letterers for sure. It's a hard thing. I'm not very good at it. But where you place stuff draws the eye, dictates the flow. And if you have control over the script, like I luckily do, you get to just say, like, these words don't add more than what I'm covering up. And I'm just going to get rid of them and let what I'm covering up say something that I didn't think was going to get said during the course of this. So,
Yeah, honestly, dude, yeah, that's a really good observation as well. And you know what? Kind of backtracking to what you had brought up earlier, you
yeah.
had said that Brand Pillis, does stuff by hand, and it's like frustrates you. So you're like, I think I'm gonna try doing it by hand too.
Yeah.
I love hearing that because that's kind of what initiates me to do stuff as well. Is that like I see someone's doing it, and I'm just like, dang, that's cool. I didn't give
Mhm.
myself enough time and patience to figure that out before. I guess I'm just gonna do it more. It's like almost out of spite, but it's like more
Yeah.
out of just like they're just so freaking awesome at it. Like, all right, I gotta like prove myself as a creator and elevate myself even more.
That the handwriting lettering, I think, might actually be a hack to draw less, though. Because
There you go.
as somebody who just finished a comic where we did the full page of art and then later I had to cover up a bunch of it with lettering, I was like, we should have just done the word bubbles in here from the start. You wouldn't have to draw anything below it and feel protective of it either. So there might be like, I don't know. I'm not gonna say Brandon's cheating the system or anything, but it's something I'm going to do when I'm penciling. I'm going to put those word bubbles on there when I have like a rough sketch of the page. And I'm not even going to worry about what's underneath it because it's going to help me move faster, and I'm going to be less protective of what I could have maybe drawn underneath it. And really just factor in the word bubbles, which are the end product anyways. So I think that's cool. And the added benefit when I ink those manually, the lettering will feel like it's more authentic, even though I'll just use a random font, but I'll ink over that for the lettering, and I'll have the ability to sell full pages with lettering,
Hmm.
which is another added
It's a
kind of
really
cool
cool
thing for
thing too.
people.
Yeah. I love
Yeah.
seeing that stuff too. And honestly, like having the lettering on the page, it kind of makes it look a little cleaner and natural, like intentional
Mhm.
sometimes too. I
Yeah.
do get what you mean, where you end up covering so much of the art, and no matter what piece you cover, like someone spent time on that,
Yeah.
and you could have saved someone 10, 20, an hour worth of time, penciling, inking,
Mhm.
coloring, all that sorts of stuff by just like adding little word bubbles in from the beginning. And of course, it depends on the format and how your team is
Yeah.
assembled and who's doing the book and whatnot. Brandon does his own show and he does everything himself and he's a beast. And,
Yeah.
I love and admire his work so much. I can't wait to like meet him in person because I'll just cry. He's just a brilliant creator. But like, that's what's cool about doing stuff like that is that you have so much control over that process. But again, it shows there's different ways to the
Yeah.
process that you could experiment upon. And I mean, even if you do draw it all out, like mapping out some word balloons, even by paper or once you do have it digitally to do it, it's a good way to start learning how to letter stuff. I
Yeah.
have my little clear device. I forget what it's called. But
Yeah, I do
essentially,
too.
yeah, you know what
Yeah,
I'm
I
talking
forget what
about,
that's
right?
called. Yeah.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
helps you just like do it at the right size and all that because
yeah,
nobody ever thinks
exactly.
manually you're going to shrink that page down. You don't even really think about it. Like, will it be the right size after I shrink it down? So that was a manual part of learning. I didn't know. There's actually a book I own from the Comic Craft. Let's see where it is. But Comic Craft put out a lettering book. That's super helpful. You
I
probably
have this one. I don't know. This is probably the only one I have.
it ain't that big. It's very
Okay.
thin. But yeah, it kind of hits everything high level, but then it has a chapter on digital lettering, which it's kind of like buying at this point it'd be like buying a Windows from the 90s manual because like
Yeah.
none of that operates anymore. But all the manual stuff in it, the first two chapters are super, super helpful. Comic Craft and following them has been good on Instagram because they offer obviously a lot of sales and stuff when you follow them. You can be on top of it for different fonts, but they offer a lot of info too, which is helpful.
Oh, that's cool. That's super rad. I love hearing that. And I know what you mean about the technology stuff. Like, I think
Yeah.
this book in specific has a lot of computer things in it that just
Mm-hmm.
like don't necessarily, yeah, some of it doesn't necessarily apply anymore because
Yeah.
stuff has been updated, but they try to generalize it enough to figure it out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But, again, these craft books, they're amazing. I love them,
Yeah.
but they do take like a lot of time to practice with. You do need
Yeah.
to be like, I'm going to study this for 6 months. And it's not something you pick up and read. It's something you kind of go through and you reference back at certain points of your career
Yeah.
as well. Um, Jeff, this has been awesome. I didn't even realize we're already at an hour of talking today, man. This has
Yeah,
been
me
such
neither.
an insightful. Like, we haven't really had an inker on the show, so like talking about the process of inking and the styles and what goes into it, I think is going to help a lot of creators have more insight and really realize what they should be doing with that essence of the craft. Especially for those who are doing it on their own, a lot of times the inking just becomes going over their pencils just to get the black line on there and start doing other things. But like the craft of inking is so like just astounding and I love it. And
Mhm.
it's the only way you'll make cool like Spawn and Batman pieces too, which is what drew me to
Yeah.
like wanting to ink. I just want to make a cool Batman and that's it. I'm happy. But
Mhm.
I love being able to do that. And we're trying to work on this segment on the show where we'll be doing like a drawing, like, hangout and whatnot. So it'd be awesome to bring you back to just
Yeah,
go over some inking techniques. I'd love to hear more about that.
for
But for
sure. Yeah.
now, why don't you tell us? I think this episode is going to be sometime March. I'm not too sure if your Kickstarter will still be up, but what are you going to be up to? Where can we find you? And what does 2024 look like for you?
Yeah. Where you can find me for the most part, I only have time for one social media, so I'm mostly just on Instagram at jad_inks. And then I have a Kickstarter live right now. It'll be up. It'll be done March 7th, so it'll probably be over at that point. But I plan on having the book that we're pushing right now, the first issue of Tales of the Mariner, which is going to be an anthology series, and depending on how well we can get this out there, whether or not we'll do more. Otherwise, the rest of 24 will be doing some cons again, trying to get back into that whole avenue, which will be fun to get back to, and prepping my next comic that I'm gonna, like I mentioned, try to do solo called Finding Kismet. So it's going to be a lot. I mean, every step of this is a ton of work. So I'm excited to get the Kickstarter done and get that out to people and start hearing what they think back. I sent a link to you, so I'd love if you got a chance to read what I sent and tell me what you thought. I'd love to hear it. And the same goes to anybody else who reads my stuff. Just drop me a line. I'd love to talk.
Nice. I love it, dude. I can't thank you enough for being on the show. We'll have you on again soon.
Yeah.
Especially as like a veteran inker. I love that. And I love we have a resource for that we could go to. And check out everyone listening, check out social media to see these inking tips and techniques being, utilized and on his page and in his live videos and everything. I love checking that stuff out. But for now, for all you listeners, thank you for checking out this episode. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell. We have 2 episodes dropping per week. We have a bunch of stuff going on with CWS. We'll be announcing more convention appearances, all sorts of stuff, all sorts of Kickstarters we'll be highlighting really soon as well. But as always, stay creative. Oh, and thanks for hanging. Stay creative and stay inspired. Thank you so much, dude. Looking for high quality printing, fast turnaround, and the industry's best customer service? Look no further than Comics Wellspring. Trusted by thousands of indie comic creators, Comics Wellspring is proven to be the go to comic book printer. So when you're ready to bring your comic books to life, go to comicswellspring.com and be sure to check out one of the best platforms to sell your physical and digital comics online, the CWS Bookstore. Remember to subscribe, hit that notification bell to see our lives come out twice every single week on YouTube and podcast platforms. And also tag us when you share your favorite episodes and moments from the show. And remember, creators, thanks for hanging, keep creating, and stay inspired.